Hi! Today we're doing a video filled with free patterns. I have 5 patterns picked out and we're going to talk through them now. I decided to make this video even though I previously stated that I was not going to do this video because sometimes we just need a free pattern so that we don't have to spend money. First of all, these 2 fabrics will look familiar if you've seen my recent thrift haul. That is really what inspired this video because I want to use these fabrics. So the first thing we're going to be making is the lingerie bag, which is a free pattern by Olulu, and this is so that you can wash your lingerie safely. You use a mesh material, which is what this is. I don't know if you can really tell in this lighting here. There's a single layer. I did already clean this, though it looks a little grubby. This is a curtain. It has a label on it. It is a Martha Stewart curtain that is equal parts polyester and cotton. And then for the bits around the zipper, you get 2 strips of pretty fabric, and I'm going to use this for that. It has bees and sunflowers on it, and it just makes me really happy. That's the first project, but I'm going to keep this in my hands because for the second project, I want to make the Tote by Steph Time here on YouTube. It's a free pattern on her website. I'll link it below. I'm going to be using this fabric for that, obviously. And then I also have this cotton overalls that my sister gave me. They're cotton linen blend, and they're too small, so I want to use this material to line the tote, and then it gets a second life. Actually, now that I'm looking at it, that might be nice for the exterior. I feel like I'll use it more if it's a neutral color. So maybe I'll use this for the exterior and this for the interior together. Next up is a pattern by Cool Stitches. It's the tie front top. I have this lightweight material that I got at thrift store. Surprise, surprise. It was 33 cents a meter, and I think there's 3 meters here. It's a very lightweight material, very thin. It has an okay drape. It's not super drapey, but it's also not super structured, so I think this will work well for that pattern. Tie front top. Next up, we have the Sweet Pea blouse by Threads. I think it's by Threads. I have this white rayon material. I'm pretty sure it's rayon. It has some shiny threads in it going one direction and then plain threads going the other way. You can see that here at the edge. Plain white, shiny. I'm going to use this for that pattern. And for that pattern, I'm going to add extra elastic around my underbust and my waist just to make it a little bit more flattering and also to make it fit easier under cardigans and sweaters because I want this to be a useful, versatile piece in my wardrobe. It's also very cottagecore vibes, very peasant toppy, so I'm excited for this. Last up, I have this leftover butter yellow corduroy from making my pinion pants. My pinion pants are actually right there. I have it all cut out but not put together yet. I want to use this to make my sister a baguette bag by Coraline Street here on YouTube. I'll link it below. So this is going to be the exterior fabric, and then I'm either going to use leftover sunflower and bee fabric for the lining, or I'm going to use the leftover green fabric from the overalls. Let's go. It's a few days later and I've already changed my mind. I have more than enough tote bags. I don't have too many project bags, and I need a couple because I'm going to make my niece and nephew some crochet kits for when we go camping in a week. I'm not using a pattern for this, so I guess maybe this is the pattern. I cut these squares out a year ago and they'll be perfect for this project. I cut these from some scrubs that my husband rescued from the garbage. So this is a secondhand material that I got for free. I'm going to sew 4 squares together for the front, 4 squares together for the back, and then 2 for the bottom for a drawstring pouch. I'll use that as a template to cut out this lovely vegetable fabric that I have, and that's going to be the exterior fabric. I'm making just basic drawstring bags. I also made little notions pouches, so I sewed 4 squares together for each of those. I pinned together the pairs and sewed them together in a long chain. Then I pressed the seams open and stitched the rows together depending on how many I needed for that particular item. So I did 5 for the drawstring pouches and 2 for the notions pouches. I pressed my seams open again. Then I took the vegetable fabric and laid it out on the floor and laid these new rectangles on top and cut matching pieces of the vegetable fabric to the squares that I had just sewn together. I folded the long rectangles in half hamburger way and sewed down the sides. I left a gap on the lining when I did that, and I turned the outer fabric right way out and stuffed that into the lining and sewed around the top, making sure to match up the side seams. And then I pulled everything through the little hole that I had left and sewed that opening closed and top stitched around the top of the bag for a neat finish. I dug through my treasure chest of trims, but I didn't find any that I thought suited the vibe of this project. So I found this thick ribbon in my ribbon stash, and I think it'll work perfect for the drawstring casing. So I cut it into 4 equal pieces and hemmed each end of those pieces and then stitched them about 2 centimeters down or 3/4 of an inch down from the top of the bag. I found this yellow ribbon in my stash that I think matches the yellow vegetables in this fabric quite well. So I cut those into 4 equal sized pieces of ribbon and burned the ends so it won't fray. I threaded this through the drawstring casings using this new tool that I got from the thrift store. I don't know what it's called, but it pinches the ribbon and makes it really easy to feed through casings like this. For the notions pouch, I started by seam ripping a hole in the bottom of the pouch in the lining. I got a really long zipper and centered the lining on that and then sandwiched the exterior fabric on top of that, making sure that the exterior fabric was on the opening side of the zipper, like the right side of the zipper, but everything was right sides together. I sewed this down, flipped it over, and top stitched along the zipper. And then I sewed down the other end of the lining and the shell fabric on the other side of the zipper. This is where having a really long zipper comes in handy, because if you don't have a really long zipper, then you can't have it all the way open so that you can top stitch along it. I pulled it inside out again and made sure that the zipper was within the confines of where I was going to sew my seams, and I put the lining on one side of the zipper and the shell on the other side of the zipper, and I folded the fabric up in a kind of pleat about an inch on each side to make the pouch a little boxy, and I sewed down with 1/4 inch seam allowance, making sure to go over the zipper a few times back and forth so that it's really secure there. I cut the extra fabric and zipper from the seam and then pulled everything out through the hole that I had stitch ripped in the lining. Then I sewed that hole closed and the pouches were done. This is one of the pouches. I have them both here, but I'm only going to show you one because they're the same. So this is the drawstring pouch. The ribbon cinches it closed really nicely. There's the inside. In here I have 3 balls of glow-in-the-dark yarn because I'm going to be teaching my niece and nephew how to make granny stitch bucket hats. And then this is the little notions pouch, which also turned out really cute. I do think it's a little big for what I needed, but I wanted to use the squares, so that is what decided the size. This fabric is directional, so on one side the vegetables are facing right way up, and on the other side they're facing upside down. Same with the drawstring pouch, but I'm okay with that. Inside the pouch is all the notions that they will need. They each got a pair of scissors. I tried to make everything as similar as possible so that they won't fight over the different things, but this came in a pack of green scissors and blue scissors, so hopefully they don't fight over that. I got them both the same measuring tape, yarn needle, and then they both got equal amounts of blue stitch markers and pink stitch markers. And then there's also a Clover Moore 5mm hook. These are my favorite hooks. So they both have one of these. And that is the first free project done. Next on my pile was the lingerie wash bags. I cut out 3 because my sisters are also making their own bras, and this will help them take care of them. I picked out 3 lightweight zippers from my stash. One has stains on it, so I'll keep that one for myself. I started by serging the tops and bottoms of the cotton pieces that are meant to go around the zipper. I sewed the zipper in between those 2 cotton pieces, making sure to top stitch after I was done sewing those seams. I attached that zipper cotton bit to one side of the net and then top stitched it. The last cotton piece that was left I attached to the other side of the net and then top stitched it. I folded the large rectangle. I pinned it in half hamburger way and sewed from one corner up around the zipper and then down to the other side. And then I serged down the long edges because all the other edges were finished. And then I flipped it right side out, and then those were done. Those were really fast, and I think that they're going to be really useful in my life and hopefully in my sister's lives as well. Next up, I decided to take a break from bags and pouches and work on the Elliot top. Once I cut out the Elliot top, I also cut out the Sweet Pea top out of the same fabric because I had enough left over to cut out both. And I think that this fabric will work very nicely for these 2 tops because it's very lightweight and drapey. So I think that it'll make these tops very comfortable. I sewed in the dart and tied the strings at the pointy end, and then I pressed the dart down towards the hem of the top. I sewed the shoulder and the side seams. This pattern has a 1 centimeter seam allowance, so I made sure to use a 3/8 seam allowance for these seams. Then I serged those seams. I pressed the shoulder seam allowance to the back and the side seam allowance to the back. And then before I attached the sleeves, I attached the casing for the drawstrings. I didn't want to do it the way that the pattern suggests, where it kind of curves up under the bust. I don't like how that looks, so I just made it straight under the bust and then straight at the waist as well. For the sleeves, I basted the gathering stitches, sewed the underarm seam, pressed that open, serged it, put the sleeve in the body of the blouse. This is huge. I don't know what I'm gonna do with that. I don't like it. So I already serged that. I think I need to bring the shoulder in anyway. So I think I'm just gonna cut that off. I don't know what I'm gonna do for the sleeve. So I'm gonna put this aside and work on the Sweet Pea blouse instead, because I don't have the brain for this right now. I think I'm actually done with tops for now. I think I need a little bit of a change of pace, so I'm going to go back to bag making. I'm going to start the Baguette mini bag with the pocket, which I modified. This is the regular size of the pocket. I found it was too big when I've made this bag before, so I just folded it like that. And that's my pocket. I cut the pocket out of the pant legs I cut off of my husband's pants when I did my Make, Do, and Mend video. And the entire lining is cut out of the straps of that pant. And then the exterior is leftover corduroy, butter yellow corduroy from when I made the pinion pants. It's a few days later. We just got back from camping and we adopted a puppy. It was kind of spur of the moment, but she's adorable. We got her from the pound. She was left on the side of the road in a town near us, and she's only 7 months old, and she's very, very sweet, so I've called her Sweetheart. After being frustrated with the Elliot top, I didn't actually start another project. I actually just went and sat on my couch to knit for the rest of the day. The next day, I didn't feel like talking to the camera, so here I am talking to the camera now. I did the front keyhole opening. I sewed around the slit and then I turned it right side out, pinned the raw edges under, and stitched the facing in place. This wasn't like the neatest job, but the gathers will probably disguise that. Then I sewed the sleeves to the front, pressed that seam open and serged it, then pressed the seam towards the body. I did the same process for the back. I sewed the side seams under the arm and down the body, and this is my least favorite way of finishing a sewn shirt. I hate it because that corner seam right under the arm is so awkward and it's really hard to finish it neatly, in my opinion. I pressed it open, serged it, and pressed the seam towards the back, and then the body was constructed. For the bias binding, I opted to use some binding I had left over from when I made my Belinda blouse instead of making more. I sewed the binding right sides together to the neckline, then pressed the seam allowance towards the binding, understitched that, and then I pressed the binding to the inside of the top and folded the raw edge of the binding under and sewed it down. I hemmed the sleeves and the body. I worked on the drawstring for the neck. I stopped filming after trying it on at this point because I was disappointed. It was fitting really large and I wasn't sure that it was going to be as pretty or flattering as I wanted it to be. But I added elastic to the sleeves, closed up the hem because I decided not to add elastic to the hem, and I marked where the waist was and I added a bias channel there as well, and I threaded through the elastic, and then that top was done. I'm not super pleased with it. I do think that perhaps I cut out a size or two too large, so it just doesn't sit right on me, and it looks it's like a sack even with the elastic in. So this morning I decided to finish the Elliot top, carefully cut off the sleeve, trimming the other sleeve to about the same amount as I cut off the first sleeve. I think how I'm going to fix this is I'm going to try it on and add the pin to where my shoulder stops and then cut it about 1 centimeter farther than that for seam allowance. And then I'm going to use the sleeves to cut out the vetiver top sleeves because that is a sleeve that I know fits me well. And then I'm going to sew the sleeves on. And then I just need to make the baguette bag. I've just finished the Elliot top. I cut out the vetiver sleeves and serged down the side seam as well as across the hem. I sewed the side seam closed and pressed it open. For the hem, I did a simple rolled hem, the same as the rolled hems on every other seam, where you just fold over around the serging and then sew that down. I pinned the sleeve into the arm side. I sewed and serged it into place. When I tried it on, there was excess fabric along the back and down the front, and there's still a little bit of excess, so it kind of like opens up here, but I added a pleat at the top right on the arm seam, kind of like a dart more than a pleat. So now this top is done, and I will show it better in the try-on clips at the end of the video. The baguette bag. I actually cut this out first before any of the other projects. I used the leftover corduroy fabric, and I had to cut the strap in 2 pieces because of limited fabric. And then instead of the overalls I was going to use for the lining, I used the scraps from my husband's pants that I changed into shorts. And so this is made out of 2 pants materials, which is kind of fun. I started working on the baguette bag by serging around the pocket and folding over the top edge in a special way so that I could then turn it out and sew that down all neat and tidy. I also sewed around the body of the pocket as a guide to press the seam allowance under. I sewed the pocket to the lining, and then I sewed my label to the other lining piece. I sewed one side of the lining to one side of the bottom pieces, which I first seamed together. I left a gap in between that join so that I can use that to turn the whole bag right side out in the last step. I did the same for the exterior pieces, except for the exterior pieces I did not leave a gap. Sewing the side onto the bottom on the other side of the bag for the lining and the exterior. Now I essentially had 2 bags completely constructed, that one was the lining and one was the exterior. Then I put the body aside to work on the strap. First I had to seam the 2 pieces of this strap together because I couldn't cut it in one piece, and then I pressed that open. I folded the strap together hot dog way and sewed down that long seam. I flipped that whole strap right side out and top stitched down each end of the seam. I chose a zipper from my stash that matches the corduroy pretty perfectly. Now all the bits are prepped. I just need to put them together. I started by sewing the zipper to the right side of the corduroy, one side at a time, opening the zipper for the second side. Then I flipped the lining right side out and put that inside of the shell fabric, which was still inside out. I pinned along the zipper and sewed along the curved edges, being sure to keep the ends open. I closed the zipper partially so that it would be within the seam allowance so that I could actually functionally open and close this bag once it was done. I folded and pinned the strap so that it wouldn't twist once I put it inside the bag, and then used the hole I left in the lining to stick that between the lining and the shell fabric. I pinned and sewed the straps in place, folding it so that the strap was wrapped in the exterior fabric and then the lining fabric was separate from that. I went over the seam a few times for strength, and then I trimmed the zipper off. I pulled everything's right sides out through that hole in the lining and sewed that hole closed, carefully pinned around the opening of the zipper and sewed around that so that the lining and the shell fabric stay in place. The baguette bag is done. I think it's very nice. I have made this pattern before, but my sister really wanted one, so this one's for her. My label's on this side, the pockets on this side, and you can see the zipper matches very well. The corduroy does attract all the lint, but I think that's just a feature of corduroy, especially a light colored one. It's very visible on there. Now to conclude this video, my final thoughts. The bag and the pouch that I made for my niece and nephew for their crochet kits turned out really well and they really enjoyed them. My niece made a bucket hat. My nephew struggled to crochet. He would do 1 stitch and that would take him 15 minutes, and then he'd be frustrated, so he would go for a bike ride to calm down, which I must say is an excellent coping mechanism. The lingerie bags, that's the first actual pattern I used. I would give it 5 stars. It's a good pattern. I feel like you don't actually need to print out the pattern pieces though. It would be nice to just have like a cut list because it's all rectangles, so you can just draw it out yourself. If you're a beginner, then it's nice to have the rectangles all laid out for you so that you can make it properly. And those bags are very functional and very easy to make. Sweet pea blouse, again, I think I would give that pattern 5 stars. I don't think it's a bad pattern. It's just not the vibe I was going for, and all of the flaws that I find with it, I think are actually just preference. So it's a good pattern and it has good pattern instructions. I just don't like the end product preferentially. It doesn't have an actual place in my wardrobe like I thought it would. The Elliot top definitely gets 5 stars. That is a very nice pattern. It is easy to sew. It has video instructions, and there's also, I believe, a hack that Cool Stitches put out to make this top button instead of having the front ties, and instead of being a v-neck it has more of a crew neck. I did end up wearing this blouse out a few times and I felt great in it. I'll probably just wear it in my personal life, not to work, because I don't think it's professional for work, but it is very comfortable when I do wear it. The baguette bag also gets 5 stars. Maybe I'm being too generous with my ratings because they're all 5 stars, or maybe I was just really lucky with the patterns that I chose. The baguette bag is a very satisfying make. I do think that the creator used the wrong fabric when she made her version because it's too soft, so it doesn't hold its shape very well, or she should have interfaced it or used different interfacing. But I think that the corduroy and then the lining material that I used that was also a pair of trousers works very well for this bag because it's all very structured. That's everything I have to say about these projects. I enjoyed making them, but I am also very glad to be done. That video took me a month to film, and I'm ready to move on to the next thing, which is going to be my next installment of blouses, but I don't think that's going to be the next video that's out. I'm going to be making the bow blouse by Roberts Wood, and then I'm also going to be making Coraline blouse by Cause Patterns, I think it's called. So if you're interested in watching me make some blouses, consider subscribing. And thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!